Hello and welcome to Global Eye. I'm Parikshit Luthra. Our top focus today is on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's bilateral visit to France. Prime Minister Modi and French President Macron attended the Bastille Day parade in Paris. The parade saw the participation of a 269-member Indian Tri-Services contingent. 3 Rafale fighter jets of the Indian Air Force joined the flypast on the occasion along with French jets. The Prime Minister was also conferred with France's highest honour, the Grand Cross of the Legion of Honour, by French President Emmanuel Macron. Yesterday, while addressing the Indian diaspora, the Prime Minister said that both India and France have agreed on using UPI mechanism and that Indian tourists in France will now be able to use UPI soon from the Eiffel Tower. So how will the Prime Minister's visit to France boost trade and defence ties? Joining me now are Anil Vadva, former Secretary at the Ministry of External Affairs, and former Ambassador Ashok Sajjanar. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Ambassador Vadva, let me begin by asking you, when it comes to India's partnership with the European Union, how critical is our partnership with France there? And when it comes to solidifying the partnership further, how critical will this meeting between President Macron and Prime Minister Modi play a role?
So France is an important player in the European Union. As far as India is concerned, this relationship is based in deep trust and commitment. And the two countries have been cooperating very closely, as we know, across various domains. And that is not just defense and space and the nuclear issues, but also increasingly it's been blue economy, in trade, in investment, in education, culture, and people-to-people ties. And of course, France sees India now more and more as an important regional and global player. This relationship is certainly very strong. It's trusted, it's consistent, and it's been steady and resilient in difficult times like the nuclear tests which India conducted in 1998. It's also been very bold and ambitious, I would say, in looking for opportunities. And basically, the strength of this relationship is in the shared vision that we have of international relations and the rule of law, in multilateralism and strategic autonomy. And I think France is also becoming a trusted partner for India now in the Indo-Pacific, and is seen as a partner for the future.
Right. Ambassador Sajjanar, when it comes to participation in the Indo-Pacific, tell us how the two countries would like to move forward. What would be President Macron's priority when it comes to Indo-Pacific?
I think basically France concurs with the position that has been put on the paper by the Quad countries that we want a free and open, secure, inclusive and prosperous Indo-Pacific. So I think its own paper on the Indo-Pacific that has been issued, it basically articulates these particular elements in terms of freedom of navigation, in terms of overflights, that as far as disputes are concerned, they should be discussed, they should be resolved through diplomacy and dialogue and not through coercion. So I think these are all elements that France shares with India. India had put out its own version of the Indo-Pacific when Prime Minister Modi spoke at the Shangri-La Summit in 2018, in June 2018. So there is a great deal of convergence. What makes France particularly special amongst the European countries as far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned is, Parikshit, that it is also a resident power in this region. And it has a base in Djibouti, just at the mouth of the Indian Ocean. So it has a presence, it has significant presence, unlike many of the other countries in Europe. So here it is able to bring heft, it's able to bring strength, it's able to bring its assets into the picture. And in that sense, it provides much greater traction and strength to whatever we are talking about as far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned. So it is an ideal partner to have, and particularly in the context of the Indian Ocean also, not only in the broader region of the Indo-Pacific, but particularly in the Indian Ocean, because you would have seen that as far as the Quad is concerned, the focus has been much on the South China Sea, on the East China Sea, on the Taiwan Straits, in terms of, the 9-dash line in the South China Sea by China. But here, France
Right.
is a resident power in the Indian Ocean, so it, in terms of providing stability, security in this region, I think it can play a very significant, important role. Parikshit.
Right. Ambassador Wadhwa, when it comes to the G20, how important will our relationship with France and the Prime Minister's personal relationship with President Macron be to reach a consensus on the communique, which has literally eluded us so far? We've had no consensus, especially the wording on the Ukraine war.
I think, Parikshit, you've asked a very important question because, as we know that amongst the European leaders, it is President Macron who's perhaps got a finger on the pulse of what's happening in the Ukraine conflict. And he is one of the important leaders in Europe who's already been in touch with President Putin. He's been trying from the very beginning to find a resolution to this conflict, something which India has also been trying, and Prime Minister Modi has also articulated on many occasions. So I think when when Prime Minister Modi is in France, he would be trying to gauge from President Macron what his assessment is of Ukraine, what is actually happening there on the ground, and what is the way forward for the conflict to end as soon as possible. Now, India, as being a president of the G20, would definitely like a favorable outcome, an outcome document which is adopted by consensus, which seems very difficult at the moment, given the fact that we've not been able to reach any consensus in the foreign ministers' meeting, which was held under the G20 auspices. So it doesn't look so good at the moment. But going forward, I think when it comes to the crunch, countries would try that extra bit to find a consensus. And France is a very important interlocutor for India in that respect. And therefore, the exchange of views during this visit in particular, I would think would be very important.
Right. Ambassador Sajjanar, coming to the issue of China, clearly we saw US investing a great deal in the defense partnership with India, in the economic partnership with India, from the Navy to the Air Force to semiconductors. Now, when it comes to France, we see some big-ticket defense items on the table. Do you think France would also like India to be an alternative to China, a counter to China in the region? A strong India in a defense manner is important for France too?
I think as far as France, its relations with China are concerned, I think they are much more nuanced than the relations of the United States with China. Because you would recall that when the French President Macron was in Beijing recently, along with the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, then his position was definitely much mellower than what the position that the Americans have taken. Because the Americans, you would recall, had started with the position of decoupling. Later, they came on to de-risking of their relationship with China. While as far as Europe is concerned, France is concerned, it has been much softer in terms of how to deal with China. It has always taken the stand. In that sense, it's been somewhat of a loner, but it has very steadfastly safeguarded its strategic autonomy, saying that they should not become a satellite of the United States. Europe should have its own independent policy. So I think the two positions are quite different in terms of the collaboration with India. That has been going on, whether it is the transfer of technology, it has been taking place right from the very beginning. France has been a very steadfast partner of India, whether you take defense, whether you take space. So I think there, in terms of the foundations, it goes back much further. It is much stronger and more on a bilateral basis rather than as a counter to China per se, I would say. Because here, France sees the competition with China basically on the economic front, it doesn't really see China as a systemic threat as the United States views it. So the perspectives would be different, but in terms of, whether it is the transfer of technology by Safran or more of Rafale jets coming to India, the final objective would be the same, but I think the purpose would be quite different between the two. Parikshit.
All right. Ambassador Vada, final question to you. How important are these defense deals, the Scorpion deal, the Rafale deal for the Indian Navy? How soon do you think the leaders will be able to conclude, and how soon would we be able to access these technologies?
So, Parikshit, we can expect, the announcements to be made during this visit, of course. And you rightly pointed out that the Rafale deal and the Scorpion deal are both on the table. But I think they would take some time before the joint working groups can work out the nitty-gritty and the details of pricing, technology transfer, the terms, etc. So we're looking at, somewhere in the future, not immediate future, but maybe, a couple of years down the line till everything is completed, when we can look back and say, well, this decision has now been implemented. But more important than that is the possibility that, India would be given the technology transfer for the helicopter engines, which we have been, of course, working in collaboration with France for some time now. But that would give a big fillip to the industry in India itself. And again, another important aspect of this is the technology transfer for the medium combat aircraft, which is a futuristic aircraft, a stealth aircraft. And if the engines are going to be co-produced and co-designed and then co-certified in India, then of course it would give a bigger boost to the Indian aerospace industry. And that's what, it seems to
Ambassador
be an
Vada,
important, I
I've
think.
run out of time. Right. Ambassador Vada, those are very important points. Unfortunately, I've run out of time, but I'd like to thank you and Ambassador Sajanhar for joining us, giving us your view on the big defense deals and the larger importance of India and France coming together in Paris this week. We're going to take a short break, but coming up on the other side, India's UPI flies into France, expanding its global footprint. Indian tourists in France will be able to make payments in rupees. A special discussion with Ritesh Shukla, CEO at NPCI International Payments, on what this means for India.